I've noticed the same question keeps popping up in the comments in my videos, so I wanted to make a whole video just to address this topic. The topic is enharmonic equivalents. We're going to talk about what they are and why we use certain names for certain notes in specific scales and keys. For instance, why do some keys have sharps and others have flats? And why do we use seemingly confusing names for specific notes in certain keys, such as C flat and E sharp? Or how come the key of G sharp minor exists but not the key of G sharp major? Or why does the key of D flat major exist but not the key of D flat minor? I will answer all of these questions and more, but first I want to make sure you guys understand a few basic terms. And if it's too simple for you, feel free to skip ahead to another part later in the video. I have in the description timestamps with the different sections labeled out, so you can skip ahead if it's too easy for you. Okay, the first thing I want to make sure we understand is what a half step and a whole step is. So a half step is the smallest interval we have in music. So the smallest distance between two notes, at least in Western music, is a half step. So from here to here is a half step. From here to here is a half step. If I were to play the chromatic scale, which the chromatic scale is just playing every single note, then I am moving up in half step. From here to here is a half step, from here to here is a half step, etc. If you were playing a guitar or ukulele, you would just move up one fret, and that would be moving up a half step. A whole step is just two half steps. So from here to here is a whole step, because that's a half step and that's a half step. So two halves equal a whole. Cool. The next thing I want to make sure we know is, what does it mean to sharpen and flatten a note? So if I want to sharpen a note, it means I'm raising it by a half step. So I'm moving the pitch up one half step. So for instance, this is my note C. If I sharpen the C, I'm going to move it up a half step, and I land on this note, and we can call that note C sharp. To flatten a note, we move it down a half step. So if I'm playing this D note, if I want to flatten the D, I'm going to move it down a half step, so it will go to this note, which is a D flat. So as you can see, this note right here, it could go by two different names. We could call it a C sharp, right? Or we could call it a D flat. And that's what an enharmonic equivalent is. It's two different note names for the same pitch. So you're probably familiar with a lot of the enharmonic equivalent names of these black notes, right? Because these black keys on a piano are our sharps and our flats. And each of them can go by either a sharp name or a flat name. So this note could be C sharp or D flat. This could be D sharp or E flat. This one could be F sharp or G flat. This could be G sharp or A flat. And this one could be A sharp or B flat. Those ones you're probably pretty comfortable with. But maybe there's some trickier ones that you haven't come across before. See, we can sharpen or flatten any note. So I could take this E, for instance, and I can sharpen the E. So if I were to sharpen this E, I would play this note, right? I'm moving it up a half step. And so this note right here is an E sharp. It's also an F, right? But it could also be an E sharp. So E sharp and F are what we call enharmonic equivalents. So the same pitch, just two different names. I could also have an F flat. So here's my F, and if I flatten the F, I move it down a half step. So this note right here is my F flat. It's also an E, so E and F flat are enharmonic equivalents. What about this note right here? This is a B, right? And if I said I want a B sharp, which note would I play? I would play this note, right? Because I take that B and I move it up a half step. So this is a B sharp. It's also a C, so C and B sharp are enharmonic equivalents. If I wanted to play a C flat, so here's my C, I'm going to flatten it, and I'm playing this note now. So this is a C flat. It's also a B. You're probably asking, why would we call it a C flat? Can't we just call it a B? That's a lot easier. Well, we'll get into that later in the video. So another thing to note is that we can also even have double flats and double sharps. For instance, an F double sharp, what would that be? So here's my F, and it's really just what it sounds like. I'm going to sharpen it 2 times, so I'm going to move it up 2 half steps. So this is F sharp, this is F double sharp. It's also a G, but it's also an F double sharp. So F double sharp and G are enharmonic equivalents. If you see a double sharp written in a piece of music, it looks like a little X in front of the note. Okay, we can also have a double flat. So a double flat is, again, just what it sounds like. We're going to flatten the note 2 times instead of once. So if I wanted to play an E double flat, for instance, so here's my E. I'm just going to flatten it twice, so I'm going to move it down 2 half steps. So here's my E flat, and then here's my E double flat. So this note is also a D, so E double flat and D are enharmonic equivalents. If you see a double flat written in a piece of music, it looks like just 2 little flat symbols written in front of the note. Okay, so why do certain keys and scales have sharps while other keys and scales have flats? And why do we sometimes have some really weird enharmonic equivalent names in certain scales and keys, like C flat and B sharp? Well, it's because of one very important rule. And I think once you hear this rule, it'll make a lot more sense. So, any major or minor scale or key has to have all 7 letters of the musical alphabet in it. And it needs to also be in alphabetical order. So, just in case you don't know the notes in the musical alphabet, there are 7 of them, and it's just A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And then after G, we just go to A again. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We just keep getting higher and higher as we go up alphabetically. I guess there's one other rule I'm going to add, and that is that in the key signature, or the actual scale itself, a major or minor scale, we cannot have any double sharps or double flats. That's maybe my second rule. So 2 rules only. First rule, you have to have all 7 letters of the alphabet in it, and they need to be in alphabetical order. And the second rule is no double sharps and no double flats. So you can have a double sharp or a double flat in a song. I'm just talking about the key signature itself. So just because a song is in the key of C doesn't mean we can only use notes that are in the key of C. We can use other notes as well. I'm just purely talking about the key signatures and the actual major and minor scales. So this video is just for if you're trying to understand why certain keys and scales have sharps and flats and why sometimes they go by weird names like E sharp and F flat. Okay, let me show you what I mean by rule number 1 about how we have to have all 7 letters of the musical alphabet in our scale. So let's start with the key of D major. So I'm going to write out a D major scale. Okay, so here's my D major scale written out correctly with sharps, but let me write it out with flats too. Okay, so I just wrote out the scale now, but using flats instead of sharps. So what I mean by that is this note G flat is the same pitch as this F sharp, because F sharp and G flat are enharmonic equivalents. If you look on a piano, this is that black note that's in between an F and a G. So we could call this note F sharp or G flat. Same thing with this last note right here. We could call this note a D flat or a C sharp. But why do we call it F sharp and C sharp instead of G flat and D flats? Well, we go to my first rule, which says that you need to have all 7 letters in the musical alphabet. So ignoring all the sharps and flats, so I can even erase them so that we don't even see them, right? So if we're just looking at the letters, look, I have 2 G's and 2 D's, and I'm missing an F and a C in this one, so I'm not including all letters in the musical alphabet. But this one is great. I have D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. I have all 7 letters in the musical alphabet, and we're moving in alphabetical order. This one, we have repeat notes 2 times, and we're missing some letters. So that is why we use sharps for a D major scale instead of flats. Does that make sense? I'll give a few more examples. Okay, let's look at an F major scale. F major scale, I'm going to write it out correctly first. So how come we don't write this note B flat as an A sharp? Because A sharp and B flat are the same pitch, so we could write the scale like F, G, A sharp instead of B flat, C, D, and E. But we don't do that because then we would have these 2 A's next to each other. We need to have the B. We need after A comes B, C, D, E. So that's why we use a B flat instead of an A sharp. Really quickly, I want to say, if you haven't subscribed already to my channel, please do. I post 1 video a week and I would love to have you on board. Also, I'm going to start uploading practice worksheets so that you can practice the things that we go over in the videos and drill them a bit, and those are available for my Patreon supporters. I'm also uploading to Patreon a PDF written document that has basically the summary of each of my theory videos as well. So a link to that is in the description below. Also, if you're enjoying this video so far, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment to say hey. Okay, since we're talking about major and minor keys and scales, I want to make sure we also know the sort of formula for a major and a minor scale. So let's start with our major scale. So the distance between every note in a major scale is always the same. No matter where you start it, you're going to move up in the same order of intervals. And it's a mixture of half steps and whole steps. So I'm going to first write out the formula for a major scale. Okay, Okay, so here's our major scale formula. We start on the root, and then we move up a whole step, we move up another whole step, move up a half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So let's plug this formula into some notes so we can see how it really works and how it really is a major scale. So we're going to do a C major scale first. So here's my root, then I move up a whole step, so whole step, another whole step, then a half step, then a whole step, then another whole step, then another whole step, and then a half step. So, as you can see, root, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. There you go. See? Follows that formula. So I could pick any note, I could start anywhere, and follow that same formula, and I'll always get a major scale. For instance, let's start here. So here's my root. I'm going to go whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And there's another major scale. So we can start anywhere. So here's my root, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Again, we have another major scale. Now what about for a minor scale? So we're going to start with our root. So here is the formula for a natural minor scale. Just as a quick side note, there are 3 different types of minor scales. I'm just talking about the natural minor scale. When we talk about a minor key signature, like the key of A minor or the key of G minor, we relate those to the natural minor scale. So the same notes that are in those minor key signatures are the same notes as in a natural minor scale. Don't worry about that too much right now. I'm just telling you that this is for a natural minor scale and not a different type. So just the same way we did with our major scale formula, we can plug in a minor scale formula starting on any different note, and we're always going to get that natural minor scale. So for instance, I could start on a C, right? And so here's my root, C. So this is a C minor scale. I'm going to move up a whole step, then a half step, then a whole step, then another whole step, then a half step, then a whole step, and then another whole step. And it takes us back to the root again. So let me try it on another note. So let's start here, okay? Just picked a random note. So here's our root now, and we're gonna move up a whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, and we're back to the root again. Okay, quick little pop quiz just to make sure you were listening earlier in the video. What is the enharmonic equivalent of F double sharp? So, here's my F, and if I sharpen it 2 times, it's a G. So G is the enharmonic equivalent of F double sharp. Okay, one more question. What is the enharmonic equivalent of B double flat? So the answer is, here's my B. I flatten it 2 times. Flatten. So here's my B double flat. What note is this also? This is an A. So A and B double flat are enharmonic equivalents. Okay, back to our major and minor scales now. So these are our formulas for our major and natural minor scale. And now let's try to figure out the note names in a scale using these formulas and those rules that I mentioned earlier, okay? So let's do an A major scale first. So I'm actually gonna just erase the minor scale formula so that I can write the names of the notes in, okay? So, hopefully you wrote it down. Just kidding. So, I want to make an A major scale. So, what's gonna be my starting note of an A major scale? So the root of any scale is always just the note that's in the name. So my first note, the root note, will be an A. This A is our root note. It's also called the tonic, our first degree. That's our starting note. So A, I know that one. Here's my A. I'm gonna move up a whole step, okay? So whole step, so this note right here is a B, right? And that's cool because B comes after A in the alphabet. So after that B, I move up another whole step. Ooh, so now I'm on this note right here, which is it's either a sharp or a flat, right? We could call this note a C sharp or a D flat. But how do we know which one to call it? Well, remember that rule that we have to have all 7 letters in the musical alphabet, and it has to be in alphabetical order. So what note comes after B in the alphabet? C, right? A, B, C. So we need to call this note C sharp and not D flat. Does that make sense? So this has to be called a C sharp. We cannot call it a D flat. Then, after the C sharp, we have a half step. So here, D, and that's cool because D is the correct letter to come after C in the alphabet. So here's our D. Then we have a whole step. So E, that's pretty straightforward. And then we have a whole step after that. So, again, we have another, is either going to be an F sharp or a G flat, this note. So what do you think we're going to call it? F sharp or G flat? Well, it has to be an F sharp because after E in the alphabet is F, right? A, B, C, D, E, F. So this is an F sharp. And another reason why we know this is an F sharp and a G flat, by the way, is because we have a sharp earlier, and we can't have sharps and flats in the same key. So any major and minor scale, you're going to either have all sharps or all flats or none. You're not going to have a mixture of the two. All right, so after F sharp, we move up another whole step. This note, it could be a G sharp or an A flat. What do you think it's going to be? It's going to be a G sharp, right? Because G comes after F in the alphabet. So after G sharp, and then we move up a half step. Back to A again. You know, that's just back to the root again, that A. So, this is our A major scale. And as you can see, we just move in alphabetical order. We didn't skip any letters. And that's why, you know, we call this note a C sharp instead of a D flat. Make sense? So I have a video about how to easily memorize the circle of fourths and fifths. I'll put a link to that video in the description below if you want. And one of the best things that the circle of fourths and fifths can be used for is that it can tell you the notes that are in your major scales. And in that video, I wrote out a bunch of different major scales, and I had a lot of people commenting saying, hey, why is there a B sharp? I don't understand why there's a B sharp here. So this video is for you people. This is sort of explaining why the notes are named the way they are in these scales. And if you're wondering, why is it important to know the correct names for these scales and these keys? Well, first off, you're here watching a music theory video, aren't you? So if you're interested in learning about music theory, it is important to call things by their correct names. If you don't know the correct names for specific notes and certain keys and scales, it will be even more confusing later down the road. Now, another reason why it's good to know is, sure, you know, if you're playing a song and you refer to a note to another musician, you know, as a G flat instead of an F sharp, yes, they will know what you mean. F sharp and G flat are the same note. These enharmonic equivalents, yeah, you could call them by their incorrect name, and people will still know what you mean. But it's much better if we can use the correct terminology because it makes it easier for musicians to communicate with each other musically. If you've written music out in a certain key, people are expecting to see notes written in a certain way with certain names. So it's going to be a lot easier to read for other musicians if you are using the correct names for these notes, and it will reduce a lot of confusion. And I must say, when you really think about it, it's actually kind of easy, that the fact that it always uses every single letter in the musical alphabet. So hopefully knowing this rule will actually simplify things for you and make it less mysterious about why certain notes are called certain names. All right, so let's look at another major scale now that has some weirder note names in it. Okay, so let's look at a C sharp major scale. Okay, so I know my starting note is gonna be a C sharp, right? That's the root, because that's in the name of the scale is C sharp. So here's my root, whole step, and this note right here, are we gonna call it a D sharp or an E flat? Well, what comes after C in the alphabet? A, B, C, D, right? So I have to call it D something, so it's D sharp. Make sense? All right, the next note, before I even look at what it is on the keyboard, I know I'm gonna have to call it E something, right? Because A, B, C, D, E. E is the next note in the musical alphabet. So I know it's gonna be E something. So actually, I'm just gonna go ahead and even just write an E in because I know it's gonna be E. In fact, I could write out all the letters if I want to because I know that it's gonna be C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then C again. I know that those are gonna be the letters. Now let's figure out where we put the sharps. And we're not gonna put any flats, right? Because we don't mix sharps and flats in the same scale, right? That was another little rule. So I'm on my D sharp. The next note, I need to move up a whole step. So a whole step up from this note is here. Ah, this looks like an F, right? Doesn't that look like an F? but I said I have to call it E something. I can't call it F, I have to call it E something. So I'm gonna call it an E sharp, because here's my E, and if I sharpen that E, move it up a half step, I get to the correct note. So an E sharp is the same as an F. So we're gonna call this E sharp. Now my next note has to have an F in it, because F comes next in the alphabet. So here's my E sharp, and I'm gonna move up a half step. So this is an F sharp, right? So from my F sharp, I move up a whole step. What's this note? This is a G sharp, right? Okay, after my G sharp, I move up another whole step, right? This note right here is an A sharp. Then after A sharp, I move up another whole step. It looks like I got to the note C, right? But it says it has to be a B something. I can't call it C, I have to call it B something. Do you know what I'm gonna have to call it? I have to call it a B sharp, right? Because here's my B, and if I sharpen a B, here's my B sharp, and that's the note we want. So we have to call this B sharp instead of C, because B comes after A in the alphabet, right? And then after this B sharp, I have a half step to my final note of C sharp. So we're back to the root again. Make sense? So yeah, this is why we use weird note names like B sharp and E sharp in our scales. All right, now I have a really tricky one for you guys, okay? Okay, so now I want us to figure out what an A sharp major scale is. So I'm gonna start with my root note, which is A sharp, okay? And actually, before we figure out what exactly the note names are, let's just write in the letters that we know it's going to be, because we know, as I said, we know it always has all 7 letters of the alphabet. So after A, we have a B, then a C, then a D, then an E, then an F, then a G, and then an A again. So we know that those are going to be the letters. Spoiler alert, it's going to be all sharps, but we don't actually know which notes have sharps yet. So here's my A sharp. I'm starting here on A sharp, and then I need to move up a whole step. So I'm going to move up a whole step, and that note, it looks like a C, but it has to be called B something. So what are we going to call it? We're going to call it B sharp, because B sharp and C are enharmonic equivalents. So this note is a B sharp. Okay, so after B sharp, we move up another whole step. And this note, whoa, okay, here we just got a little crazy. So this note looks like a D, right? But it needs to be a C something. So how do I have the letter C in the name but play this D note? Well, it's gonna be a C double sharp actually, because here's my C. And if I sharpen it 2 times, sharpen, sharpen, I get to that note that we're looking for, that D note. But I need to call it C something, so I'm going to have to call it C double sharp. Then after C double sharp, I move up a half step. All right, that's a D sharp. That one's pretty straightforward, so D sharp, that one's cool. All right, after D sharp, I move up a whole step, so whole step is this note. It has to be called an E something, but it looks like it's an F. So I'm gonna call this an E sharp, because an E sharp is the same as an F, so that's the note we want. Then I move up another whole step, and now it looks like I'm on a G note, but I need this note to be called an F something. So what am I gonna call this note? I'm gonna call it here's my F. I'm gonna call it an F double sharp. So an F double sharp and G are enharmonic equivalents. So we got F double sharp. Then the next note is a whole step up. So here's my whole step. And this, it looks like it's an A note, but I need to call it G something. So I'm gonna have to call this one again G double sharp, right? Because the A and G double sharp are enharmonic equivalents. So this is a G double sharp. Okay, so here's my G double sharp, and then I move up a half step, and I get back to A sharp again. So that was our root that we started on. Okay, so here are the notes in my A sharp major scale. But if you remember, I said that my other rule is that we can't have double sharps or double flats in any key signature or any major and minor scale. No double sharps and no double flats allowed. But look, here we have 3 sets of double sharps. C double sharp, F double sharp, and G double sharp. So that means that this is actually what we call a theoretical key, or also known as an impossible key. The reason why we call it an impossible key is because it's really just too chaotic and impractical to use. You know, if you have a double sharp in your key signature, then you might have triple sharps in the music and things like that, which is just crazy. And there's a much easier way to write the notes out. So it just doesn't make any sense to write it in this key signature. Only a true psychopath would ever write a song in the key of A sharp major. But if you're feeling evil and want to hurt the eyes of some musicians who are going to play your music, you can certainly try to write a song in this key just for fun. But it's not actually a real practical key that we use. Okay, so let's say I want to write a song in the key of A sharp major, but I can't call it A sharp major because it's just not a practical key to write a song in. But I want to use the same notes and the same pitches in my key, but I needed to have easier names. So the way we figure out which key we're going to actually write the song in is we need to figure out what the enharmonic equivalent of A sharp is. Here's my A sharp. So it is also a B flat. So the enharmonic equivalent of A sharp is B flat. So I'm going to write B flat here. So technically, what that means is that a B flat major key and an A sharp major key, they have the exact same pitches and notes in them. But B flat is a way easier key to think about and work within. So that's why we wouldn't use A sharp major as a key signature or a scale. We would use B flat instead. So this is sort of why certain key signatures exist and others don't. So I think at the beginning of the video I said, why is it that we don't have a key of G sharp major, but we do have a key of G sharp minor? Well, the key of G sharp minor, it doesn't have any double sharps or double flats in it. It's a cool key that we can work within. But the key of G sharp major does have double sharps in it. So instead of a G sharp major, we would use A flat major, because G sharp and A flat are the same thing. Anyway, let's figure out the notes in a B flat major scale, shall we? So here's my B flat, my starting note. I move up a whole step, so C, right? And because after B comes C, that one works out well, right? C, and then I move up another whole step, D, nice and easy. Oh, wow, this is so much easier. All right, so after D, I move up a half step to, this is an E flat, right? Because E comes after D in the alphabet, so that one's nice and easy and cool. Then after E flat, I move up a whole step to, this note right here is an F. Super easy, very clean and nice. Okay, after F, I move up another whole step to G. Again, easy. After G, I move up another whole step, A. Again, nice and easy. And after A, I move up a half step to B flat. Back to the root again. So as you can see, these two scales, if I were to play them on the piano, they sound identical, right? So this is what they sound like. Both of them sound exactly like this. But it's a lot easier to call it a B flat major scale, or think of this as a B flat major key signature, than it is to call it an A sharp major scale and think of an A sharp major key signature. Okay, I want us to do a few minor scales and minor key signatures now. So before we jump into those minor keys and minor scales, I'm going to write the formula out for a minor scale. So here's the formula for my natural minor scale. It's root, whole, half, whole, half, whole. Now, before we start figuring out sort of the correct note names for certain minor scales and key signatures, I want us to first look at how a major scale and a minor scale compare to one another. I'm going to introduce now a term that maybe you know or maybe you don't know, but it's an important one to know, and it's called a parallel key. And a parallel key is just a major and a minor key that start with the same note name. So for instance, C major and C minor are parallel keys. G major and G minor are parallel keys. E flat major and E flat minor are parallel keys. So let's look at how parallel keys are different from one another. So for instance, let's say I want to start with a C major scale, nice and easy. And let's say I know the notes in my C major scale, but I want to figure out what the notes are in the parallel minor scale. The parallel minor scale is C minor. So this is a good thing to know. If you want to figure out what the parallel minor scale is, you are just going to flatten 3 of the notes. I'm going to write flat 3, flat 6, and flat 7. So those are the 3 notes that we're going to flatten to create a C minor scale. So I'm gonna write C minor. Okay, so let's figure out the notes now. Just not using this formula, but just using this major scale and flattening the 3 places. So we're gonna start with a C, right? Then a D. And what I mean by the third, when I say flatten third and flatten sixth, is I'm talking about the third note in the scale. So 1, 2, 3. So this E note, we're going to flatten it. So what's the flattened E? It's just an E flat. So E flat is my flattened third, okay? The 4th note, F, that's fine, that stays the same. 5th note, G, that's fine, that stays the same. A is the 6th note. Ah, that's one of the ones we flattened. So that one has to turn into what? An A flat. And then the last note, the B, the 7th degree, also has to be flattened. So that's going to turn into a B flat. Cool? So parallel major and minor keys, like a C major and a C minor key, the places where they differ are on that 3rd degree. We have a flattened 3rd, a flattened 6th, and a flattened 7th. Okay, let's try to figure out the notes in a G minor scale. Okay, so what's my root note going to be of a G minor scale? It's going to be a G, right? So we start with a G. And just like our major scales, we also are going to use all 7 letters in the musical alphabet, and it goes in alphabetical order. So I could go ahead and just write the letters in without even worrying about sharps or flats yet. So after a G, what comes next in the musical alphabet? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. We go back to A again. So A is going to be the next letter. I know it's going to be an A something. Then after A, it's going to be a B something, then a C something, then a D something, then an E something, then an F something, and then we end on G again. Cool? So now we start on G, our root, and we move up a whole step. So a whole step is A. Ah, cool. Nice and easy. It's the name is A, so that's easy. So from A, we move up a half step. So here we have, this note is a B flat. So I have to call it a B flat and not an A sharp, right? Because it needs to be B something. So we're going to call this one B flat. Okay. So after B flat, I move up a whole step to C. Ah, look, C. Nice and easy. Okay, C. Another whole step. D. Again, nice and easy. Then we move up a half step. Okay, so is this going to be a D sharp or an E flat? It's going to be an E flat, right? Because we already have a flat, so we know it's going to be a flat. And because it had to be E something, so E flat. Then we move up a whole step to F. Ah, nice and easy, F. And then another whole step to get back to our root again of G. I know my starting note is going to be an F sharp, right? Because that's the note in the name of the scale. F sharp is our root. And then I move up a whole step to G sharp, right? And I know this is going to be a G sharp and not an A flat because G comes after F in the alphabet. So I have to call it G sharp instead of A flat. So G sharp. Then I move up a half step to A, and A is the next letter in the musical alphabet, so that one's cool and nice and easy. A. So after A, I move up a whole step to B, right? And again, B, I can call it B because B is what comes after A in the alphabet. Nice and easy. So after B, I move up another whole step. So, do I call this note a C sharp or a D flat? Well, it has to be C something because A, B, C, right? So C sharp. And obviously it's a key with sharps in it. We can't use flats, so C sharp. Then we move up a half step to D. So D, nice and easy. After D, we move up a whole step to E. That one is cool too, nice and simple. And after E, we move up another whole step to F sharp. We get back to our root again, so F sharp. All right, let's do some trickier ones now. All right, so as you can see, using the keyboard to figure out the notes in these minor scales isn't too difficult if we have this formula up here. So let's go back to trying to figure out the minor scale based on the parallel major scale, okay? So I'm gonna tell you what a D flat major scale is, and using that D flat major scale, I want us to then figure out what a D flat minor scale is, okay? So bear with me. I'm gonna first just write out the notes in a D flat major scale. Okay, so here are the notes in a D flat major scale: D flat, E flat, F, G flat, A flat, B flat, C. So, not using this formula up here, just using the notes in the major scale. Let's figure out what the notes in a D flat minor scale are. So if you remember earlier in the video, I said if we want to take a major scale and figure out what the parallel minor scale is, we need to flatten 3 notes in the scale. So flatten 3 notes. Do you remember what they were? It was a flattened third, a flattened sixth, and a flattened seventh. Okay? So I'm just gonna take this scale and flatten those 3 notes in the scale. And so this is gonna be my D flat minor scale. Okay, so I start with a D flat, that one's fine. The first degree is okay. The second degree, E flat, that one's cool too, that can stay the same. Now the third degree, the F, I need to flatten the third, right? So this is gonna have to turn into an F flat, right? Then the fourth degree, G flat, that one can stay the same. The fifth degree, A flat, that one can stay the same as well. Now the sixth degree, B flat, I need to flatten that one, right? Because I need to have a flat 6. So how do we flatten a B flat? Well, we're gonna have to call it B double flat. Even though it has this crazy name, B double flat, we have to call it B double flat because we can't skip over the letter B in the alphabet. So it has to be B double flat, okay? And the last one, the 7th degree, I need to flatten that one as well. So this is gonna turn into a C flat, okay? So these are the notes in my D flat minor scale. But wait a second, I see a little red flag. There's double flat right here. I don't think that's allowed, is it, right? We were talking about this earlier in the video. Whenever we see a double flat or a double sharp, that's a big no-no. That means that the key of D flat minor is an impossible key or a theoretical key. It's not actually a practical key that we would want to ever play in. So if I want to play in the key of D flat minor, but I need it to actually be a real key signature, I need to figure out what the enharmonic equivalent of the note D flat is, that root. So what is the enharmonic equivalent of D flat? It's a C sharp. So I can't have a D flat minor scale, but I can have a C sharp minor scale. So instead of writing a song in the key of D flat minor, I would write it in the key of C sharp minor, because C sharp minor is a key that we can actually play in. It doesn't have any double sharps or double flats in it. Now the key of D flat major is cool, right? That one's cool, but the key of D flat minor, not cool. Cool, not cool. So just for fun, let's look at what the notes are in a C sharp minor scale. Okay, so C sharp minor scale. I know I'm gonna start on my root note of C sharp, and I can just go ahead and write in the rest of the letters, right? Because I know what they're gonna be. It's gonna be a C, then a D, then an E, right? We just go in alphabetical order, F, G, A, B, and I know I'm gonna end on a C sharp again, right? We end back at the root. So I'm gonna start on my C sharp, and I'm gonna move up first a whole step. So whole step to a D sharp. All right, D sharp. Then I move up a half step to E. Oh, that one's pretty straightforward. It says E, cool. Then I move up a whole step. That's a F sharp, right? Not a G flat, but an F sharp. Then I move up another whole step to G sharp. Again, pretty straightforward. To G sharp. Then I move up a half step to A. A, nice and simple. Then I move up a whole step to B, again, nice and simple. And then I move up another whole step back to C sharp, and that's how I end my minor scale. So this is the key of C sharp minor, the C sharp minor scale, and this one, as you can see, is totally cool to use. It's much more manageable than that D flat minor scale, so we would always play in the key of C sharp minor instead of D flat minor. So hopefully you're starting to understand why certain keys do exist and other keys don't exist, and hopefully the term enharmonic equivalent makes good sense to you at this point as well. I'm leaving you with one last fun little game. If you can come up with another impossible key signature, so it could be any major or minor key signature that has double sharps or double flats in it, leave it in the comments below and let's see how many we can list. As I said earlier, I've uploaded practice sheets to my Patreon that can help you drill and practice some of the things that we went over in this video. I also have a PDF written document that summarizes all the things we went over in this video as well, which is also available for Patreon supporters. link to my Patreon in the description below. Again, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave a comment. I will do my best to respond as quickly as possible. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do. I post a video every week, and I would love to have you here with me. All right, guys, that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.